So a very warm welcome also from my side, and a massive thank you, Florian, for doing the introduction as well. So my name is Anett, as Florian already mentioned. I'm the Chief of International Affairs of a global, the best cybersecurity company on the planet called Neverhack. And today we are going to talk about the cyber sovereignty. I think it's pretty clear that it's every country's responsibility to make sure that its citizen information data is stored safely, and of course also that the innovation in the country would still be, on a very high level. But I do think that we are more and more dependent on the global tensions, what's happening geopolitically, and then of course also as we think about that different countries are using solutions provided by the global tech companies, then obviously also we are also dependent on them. But I think for every country it's also a big challenge how to find this kind of a balance between using the private sector solutions that are also global tech companies and then also doing things locally. So there has been a lot of discussions in terms of are we sovereign when it comes to cybersecurity and the data. So this is exactly what we're going to start discussing today. I would actually kick it off with the first kind of a more general question. So what does it actually mean for a nation to control its digital space when it comes to from infrastructure to data and cyber operations? So I would give the word to you first.
Right.
Should be working.
Should be working. Okay, here we go. So first of all, big thank you for the invitation to be here. It's a pleasure. My first time in Estonia. I've had a long career in technology, and for many years when I heard the word sovereignty, kind of a shield went down my spine, because I think we governments we owe ourselves two duties. One of them is to provide the best services we can possibly provide to our citizens and for our businesses, but the other one is also to kind of keep them safe and try to prevent any worst case scenarios. And right now these two things might be a little bit in conflict, and I think that's what kind of brings these discussions to life, so it's good to be here on stage. Let's talk a little bit about AI first, and our stance on this is we as a country shouldn't fear AI, and we should really kind of fear other countries who use AI better than us, and that's our driving principle. And if you must equip yourself with the best tools out there. You have to use the best, and that is something that is a principle that we shouldn't never abdicate from. Above all, because it's meant to produce productivity at the national level and drive the economy and drive growth. But we also have to watch out for what sovereignty really means for people, and for security, and for everything else that kind of people are concerned about. But we do see sovereignty as a function essentially of three things, and very aligned with the Draghi report. Sovereignty is essentially a function of economic competitiveness. It's not just a short-term concern. It's that we got into this state of affairs because we have not been simplifying our regulations hard enough. We haven't been financing our startups and our businesses enough, and especially giving enough access to venture capital. Someone on stage yesterday had a chart that only had 20% of total VC funds in Europe compared to the size of the US VC funding, and we have not been investing enough in skills. So if you take sovereignty under a long-term lens, then we need to simplify, we need to finance more, and we need better skills. And on top of that, and once you secure that, then you can build world-class e-government services under a sovereign cloud solution that is private by design. And what does private by design really mean? And again, I'm not going into the discussion about what supplier you should use or not. You should always use the best one available. It means that you build the solutions with transparency in mind, so knowing who owns your data, where it's stored, what people are doing with it, control, meaning that citizens and business can control their own data and extricate it and move it, shift it and lift it whenever they need to. And security, that it is held safely and that it's not going to be compromised, and kind of they trust the government to hold it in a safe environment. So yes, we take a much more holistic view of sovereignty, where we need to use the best tools, but we need to be careful on how we put it together.
I will formulate this question a bit differently to you, Eva. So Latvia has been always very active when it comes to regional and EU also cybersecurity work, and we've been really admiring this also from the Estonian side here. So in your opinion, what are the international cooperations that are the most important, especially when we think about countering growing cyber threats and kind of building this collective resilience here in Europe, and especially also maybe taking this angle, like, are we competitive enough to do it alone here in Europe, or do we need also global partners?
So, given the threat picture we are facing here in this region, and that the cyber attacks are our day-to-day business, basically, and our systems are being, and our critical infrastructure systems are being under attack since 2022 at the severe levels. And we have managed to operate our cyberspace in a very stable manner, and I think our third team is doing a great job. And we at the National Cybersecurity Center see this international cooperation as one of the key elements for such a success story. So for Latvia, of course, NATO is the cornerstone of our national defense. And resilience plays a very big role in this. So being active and exercise together and to do the routine checks on our procedures within the NATO is one of our utmost priorities. But of course, it doesn't end with our membership in the NATO. We have to have this very good regional cooperation here in the Baltics between the Nordic Baltic countries, and of course at the wider EU level. And I think the cooperations we have in several very practical levels, for example in the exercise Locked Shields, shows that this partnership goes even beyond this continent. For example, next year we will exercise together with Singapore and with their experts, and I think there is a lot to share, a lot to learn from each other, and we should be more proactive with this learning, with this understanding, and also sharing the information between us and the best practices, because the threats we are facing are quite similar.
Yeah, across the globe. That's why, again, the globalization side there. I'm jumping now to Moldova, to you, Nicoleta. You are the director of the eGovernance agency in Moldova, and you know, Moldova has done tremendous steps in order to really develop more digital services to its citizens as well, which also brings a lot of risks. You just recently had elections in Moldova with pretty great results. And if you could just kind of cover a bit this, what were the main lessons that you learned from the elections in Moldova, and especially when we think about like dealing with hostile actors?
So, thank you. First of all, that's a very complex question. It's we don't have sufficient time for it generally, but I think it's very important to enunciate a couple of things. First, the election results are the collective voice of the Moldovan people, regardless of where they are, within the country or outside the country. We have a very large diaspora. We have diaspora in Estonia as well, very active one, a very powerful one. So this is the collective voice of the people. And what we've shown is that resilience is not an Your question is quite interesting. Who controls the digital domain? Or I think the one who controls it is the person who knows how to ask questions and have critical thinking, if we're talking in the context of elections. Now, in terms of cybersecurity, and going back to your first question a little bit, this year, we're marking in Moldova 15 years since we started the process of digital transformation. Our agency turns 15 years today. That means that 15 years ago, we set out a national strategy, a national white paper that established the rules and the baseline of how we will build our resilient infrastructure. And our point was that we will build it modularly, we will build the systems, and we will make it so that they are vendor agnostic, so that we control it as the state, we can operate it at any point in time, we can move from one vendor to another, and we build the capabilities within our institutions in order to be able to manage them. So that is from the technical overview and organizational overview. And in terms of the legislative framework, we have set in place, and we have very robust protections for data privacy as well. The National Data Protection Agency is one of our biggest adversaries every time we want to build something that is more user-friendly in certain cases, but that's generally the framework, right? Because in the end, you control your data, but we distribute it through registries. Institutions have the mandate to make sure that the data, that your data in those registries is accurate, and we made sure that the data flows by enabling the once-only principle. And the once-only principle is the way we share data, and is the way for us to build good, better services. Now, going back to elections, this infrastructure, because every system, all of our systems are based and hosted in what we call mCloud, all of our governmental systems. They're not stored in third-party vendors. They're not distributed across. So we have our own cloud infrastructure. We have our own governmental cert. In addition to that, 2 years ago, we established the National Cybersecurity Agency by following and implementing the NIS2 directive as well. So we've made concrete steps in terms of making sure that we bring all actors to the table, we bring all of the resilience, we bring the stakeholders on the same page, and we have more oversight and control over that. But it's one thing to control and defend the infrastructure, because on the election day, we had hundreds of millions of DDoS attacks and attacks on the critical infrastructure. And even after that, yesterday, the day before that, we had massive attacks on our governmental digital infrastructure. And what we've shown is, and you wouldn't believe how many people are actually involved, but we're continuously resisting by making sure that we build our strong institutions. Now, aside from that, collaboration is key, because we're massive hybrid threats. It's not just threatening your digital system by corrupting trust, the social trust in the system, by corrupting it because a system is down and it's not visible, and it kind of affects transparency. We also had intimidation, coercion, voter buying, all sorts of transactions and money being funneled through the country, hundreds of millions of dollars going into Moldova. So the collaboration between the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the government, international bodies as well has been key. We are looking forward to put out a paper with more details as a country about how we handled it, but it's all about collaboration, and in the end, the collective will of the people.
All right, thank you. So I'm jumping back to Portugal right now as well. I started my introduction for the panel talking about the dependency of like the global big tech companies. As Portugal is also very heavily expanding its digital public services, which is also your field of work, how is it reducing actually the dependence on a few very major global tech companies for critical infrastructure? Because I do know that there are few companies that are playing a huge role in Portugal and for the critical infrastructure.
Sure. So, look, the ultimate challenge is to build resilience without closing the doors to innovation. And again, like I said at the beginning, we will not abdicate from the principle of using the best tools available for the job, which I think is a must. However, one could argue that Europe got itself into this situation because we outsourced our energy strategy to one economic bloc, we outsourced our industrial strategy to another economic bloc, and we outsourced our technology strategy to another economic bloc. And now we're trying desperately kind of claw that back. I don't think it's possible to claw all of that back. But you can make some really good efforts into trying to at least control the controllables. The first one is energy supply. We have actively worked to producing one of the countries in the world with the highest level of renewable energy, 70%. We've shut down all of our coal-fired power stations. We're heavily involved in building solar like there's no tomorrow, wind, hydro, etc. So energy supply, start there. I mean, because you can't run a data center without any of this stuff. Second, the critical infrastructure itself, telecommunications, we're one of the first countries to ban Huawei from our network. Just if there is a critical system that needs to be protected and act decisively, just go ahead and do it. Don't wait around. Building the sovereign cloud solution, that sounds like I have some stuff to learn from Moldova. But then again, the resilience ultimately comes from people understanding that you're building great services on top of that. And if you don't have the great service, what are you building resilience for? So you need a sovereign LLM, which we're looking into. Actually just announced it, the first version last week. The digital wallets, we want to be one of the first country in Europe to launch a business wallet, in which I think we're fighting with some other countries for the first position on that one. And then you just have to base everything on open source, interoperability, only one's principle, all that stuff. And once you do that, then people understand that it is worth having more control over your own infrastructure because they can see the benefit.
Can I touch up on one of the topics here that wasn't on my list here? So speaking of especially some of the big tech companies, and you mentioned Huawei, in Estonia by the law, it's actually like, for example, like if you work for the government here, you are not even allowed to have a phone or any kind of a product by Huawei. So do you think it's right when more of the countries would actually ban some of the tech companies that we shouldn't really use in Europe, that are a massive threat to our security?
No, look, like I said at the beginning, we will never abdicate from using the best technology available, and it just has to be compliant with some basic rules, like no backdoors, kind of like the basic principles of kind of civility. If you have a technology, it should work for the purposes for which it was designed and for which you're paying for. If it's not meeting, then we're not going to use it. So I think there's a healthy debate about where that line sits. Personally, I don't think it's worth considering favoring one company over another or adding protectionism to any of this stuff. Again, using the best tool for the job. If you don't have it in-house, buy it from somewhere else. Countries of our size will never be full stack countries. And even Europe as a whole will struggle being a full stack company. And I'm not sure if it's worth the opportunity cost of doing so. However, in specific occasions, when there is a clear security risk, then if that exists, then act decisively, which I think is what we did in the case of our telco infrastructure and our cell phone towers.
All right. I will jump back to Latvia as well now. You are the deputy director at the new National Cybersecurity Center. There's obviously plays a massive role in protecting the channel Latvia's digital space, but how will it actually handle both when we think about the state-sponsored attacks and then the cybersecurity needs of local organizations?
Yes, I would say that these both things are very much linked together. The attacks we are having are mainly politically motivated. And in the previous years, we saw that they are mostly targeted towards the state institutions, to the critical infrastructure, to the critical service providers in the energy and transportation systems. But for the past year, the local businesses are actually being targeted and affected. And I think that while the attack levels are very high, but they have low impact. And I think the National Cybersecurity Center, with the proactive measure approach, have contributed a lot to create this safe space so we can provide the critical services and defend from those attacks, and also to enable the local organizations and businesses for them to be cyber secure. We have been doing for more than 3 years active threat hunt operations. So we are hunting down those vulnerabilities in our systems preemptively. We are having our national SOC network, and we are planning to expand it in a bit wider regional, a bit wider in the Nordic Baltic region. The early warning sensors, all of our informative seminars and direct dialogue with the businesses and with the local organizations, I think this all gives us opportunity to be both the defender and also enabler for those local organizations.
So it's very, very important to invest into the skills and knowledge of the future generation. And our kids in the future are much smarter when it comes to using the digital platforms than maybe the previous generation is. So my question to each one of the panelists here is that when we make different kind of decisions, either on a national level or also on the European level, are we really considering kind of the demands from the citizens, or do they even have ones? We have the local elections coming here in Estonia, and we just simply had a conversation with one of my friends a couple of days ago and asked, when was the last time that any politician was running its campaign talking about our digital future or the cybersecurity? And I simply couldn't find not a single politician that would touch up on these topics, even here where everything is functioning online and the security really matters, and not even the hybrid threats that we simply don't talk about these things. Of course, maybe for like a local level, it's not the topic, but also the parliament elections. So maybe kind of a general questions. Do you think that we are considering the citizens' demands, and do they even know what they're asking from the state in terms of when we think about the topic of our discussion is the cyber sovereignty and keeping their personal information safe?
That's a very broad question because it has cyber sovereignty, information safe, asking about what you want from your digital government. So yeah, pick your angle. So look, I can give you our overview, our national context. We were thinking about just strategically as a country 4 years ago when our pro-European party won. They also ran on an agenda of digitalization and building more resilient digital infrastructure, better solutions and so on, but that was a promise, like an initial promise. However, we are consistently, as an institution, in active engagement and talks with the people in itself. So it's not so much as what you promise to the people, because people don't, at least not in Moldova, when they're struggling to go to meet the ends by the end of the next month, they don't care that much about is the service digital or not. They care about their buying power, right? So this is the main priority for us. And that drives us in return to make it so that whenever they need to search for something, whenever they need to find something, we make it as easy and as seamless as possible so that they don't even think about it. And we're doing under the radar, but the change is so visible and it penetrates the entire infrastructure. Now, and the communities, and it goes beyond the main city, it goes beyond us, the ones that have their phones and are very cool and have an electronic signature. So we have a network of what we call centers of unified public service delivery. This is us bridging the digital divide for people in the rural areas that don't have access to, that don't, we have like specialized people that allow you and help you get access to services so that this becomes a non-issue. And then you focus on the real issues, on the real things. Now going back to sovereignty and information and so on, we know, and I think we realize that you can ban many things. But what you cannot ban is the way information infects your mind and your brain, and you can have the most secure, the most adapted internal control systems, and yet the weak link is the person getting into the room, right? So then how do you build resilience in your citizens? How do you build resilience in the minds? How do you make sure that you teach them and you build them up and so on? Because one is preventing and reacting to threats, and another is taking a strategic step in that direction. And I think we're starting as a country to take that more seriously. We have a Center for Strategic Communications. We have a very robust, a very active journalistic community, civil society, watchdog organizations that have taken a very serious role in fighting disinformation, in talking to people, in uncovering interference. And the role of society and civil society will always continue to remain crucial for a thriving democracy and for a fair democracy.
I will formulate the question a bit more like concrete to both of you here. It's a very short question. Do you think people actually even care? Or like Nicoleta said before, they just simply expect us to deal with these things and make sure that everything is safe on a background? Or do people with just lack of knowledge? Or I had one of the questions prepared, maybe that's kind of an add to this question, is like, how does actually sovereignty affect citizens' privacy and freedoms, and do they understand about that they care about that?
Well, I do believe they do care about it, and also that they expect us to successfully defend and provide this critical service they are in need. And I think we have successfully implemented this comprehensive defense system where each of us, the government, the businesses, and every citizen have their own roles, have their own responsibilities towards their security, and cybersecurity and digital literacy is just one of the layers on top of all of that. And we are working very closely, reaching out to them, doing the regional seminars, the dialogues, launching the awareness campaigns. More specifically, we are focusing right now on the teaching staff in the schools. So our teachers would be the enablers for the cybersecurity knowledge they could pass to the children and also to the parents who are one of the vulnerable groups.
Have there been any elections in Portugal that one of the politicians have focused on these topics in their campaign?
So yeah, we have an election on Sunday actually, and I would argue that my boss, the minister, Ministry of State Reform, this is built on that's his platform, and we need to be able to build much better, much more resilient systems. Sovereignty again, like it's a tough word because I don't think countries of our size, the definition of sovereignty needs to change. But answering your question directly, do people care? I think they care very much when it goes wrong.
Exactly.
And that the role of governments is to prepare for the unthinkable, and we need to be ready when things go wrong, and that's what we do, and that's why we're here, and that's why we work every day to make people's lives better, easier, safer. So yeah, they do care, but only in very specific instances. And I guess if you're a responsible politician or a head of an important agency, it's your job to prepare for the day when it might go wrong, make sure it doesn't.
So I think as kind of a wrap up, because we are out of time now, I would say that to answer the question who controls the digital domain are the ones that have the best technology. And if we do, and I know everybody are tired of hearing this, but very great collaboration between public and private sector, and the governments are willing to buy solutions from companies that actually do provide a safe solution, that are making sure that their citizen information will be safe and sound, and people can sleep peacefully at night, because problems will come when things go wrong. So the expectations might be actually very high, we just simply don't talk about this enough. But at the end of the day, every country's responsibility and decision regarding the sovereignty. Cyber threats are global, so I think we also need kind of a global approach in there. But I wish everybody here a very interesting discussions and different panels and keynotes that you can listen to. And thanks once again for coming to Tallinn. And please join me for a massive round of applause to our wonderful panelists.